It's been a long-running thought that pilots from Titanfall would wipe the floor with legends, but is it really true? Are pilots legendary soldiers with ultra-human strength, agility and endurance, or are they just highly trained grunts? Well, it's time to settle the debate. We've got some details from one of the writers themselves that gives a bit of a better insight into what makes a pilot, so let's start there. On Twitter, Rumjake asked, are pilots superhuman like Halo Spartans, or just well-trained grunts? Manny Hagopian replied by saying that pilots are extremely well-trained grunts. Now this may be a bit of a disappointment to Titanfall fans out there, but Manny is the lead writer and has been there to write the story since the very beginning, so it's canon. Pilots are just standard humans. We've all been under the impression that pilots are some sort of super soldiers. They're the thing of myth and legend in the Titanfall universe, and grunts look at pilots in awe. But we could pair pilots with the SAS or highly trained units in real life. The standard soldier may go through training and hear about the inspiring stories from SAS soldiers, and they eventually become the stuff of legend. So it makes sense why in the story pilots are made out to be almost inhuman, when really they're just highly trained and highly skilled. So that definitely brings the level down, and the question of asking whether Titanfall pilots or Apex Legends would win in a fight seems far more reasonable. So who would win? It's a hard question to answer, but I'll try my best to dig at it. Maybe we could start by comparing the abilities of a pilot to a legend, and then maybe that will help. Pilots are very fast and agile. They are trained to use jump jets to move around quickly. They can run on walls, jump faster, higher than the standard person. Pilots can also use technology to help themselves in battle. Some pilots can cloak themselves to go invisible for a short time. Others can use stim, just like Octane can, to get a boost in speed. Other pilots can use grapples or create hollow clones of themselves to confuse their opponents. You may have noticed something about most of these abilities. Many legends have these abilities as part of their kit too. I think it's safe to say that if a technology is available in the Titanfall universe, both pilots and legends can use them equally, so this doesn't really help us answer the question any better. Take away the gear from both a pilot and a legend, and it's just a straight up battle that's even more difficult to determine the winner. In fact, I'd say it's just as easy to say that the characters in Titanfall or Apex could have ended up being either a pilot or a legend. Take Bangalore for example. In her backstory, we know that she had been a highly talented IMC grunt from a young age. What's to say that if she was born just a couple decades earlier, she couldn't have grown up to go through pilot training too? She certainly had the knowledge and skills for it, she just didn't have the opportunity to be taken under the arm of a highly skilled pilot like Jack Cooper had Lastimosa by his side. I think that Jack Cooper could beat Bangalore in a fight. His heroic traits far outweigh that of Bangalore's, but he's had the opportunity to train in better environments, so it makes sense. I think everybody has their own unique traits and abilities, whether it's a pilot with a grapple, a jump kit and a Kraber, or a legend with a gravity lift and a mini black hole. I think all of these abilities themselves have a chance to be a better ability in a straight up fight, but as we can tell from Bangalore's story, I think it comes down to the combat experience of each person more than anything else. So we should go through the legends individually. Could Jack Cooper beat all of the legends? Let's go through them one by one. Let's start with Crypto, Watson, Rampart, Mirage and Octane. These legends have had lives fairly sheltered from the war from what we know. They definitely haven't had any military training, so whilst Octane may be experienced in death-defying stunts, I don't think he could defy death in a fight against a well-trained pilot. Rampart is a weapons expert, but that's not going to get her far against a soldier with decades of military training. We know Watson is young and grew up as an engineer. Once again, she'd have a tough time fighting against pilots. Mirage grew up and around pilots. His uncles are the famous Davis and Droz, so he could have become a pilot too, but instead he spent a lot of time at home, and quite honestly I'm surprised he managed to stumble into the position he is now. He's efficient at being a bamboozler, but I think it has been through some sheer luck. He'd get absolutely torn to pieces by a pilot, or I guess somehow accidentally fumble his way through a fight and become victorious. He's that kind of clumsy, lucky person. But yeah, we can cross him off the list really. Crypto is smart and cunning, but I don't think he's as smart as a pilot. He lacks any military training as well, and whilst he has a lot of augments, I don't think they'd help him in a fight against a pilot. What about Gibraltar and Lifeline? Both of them come from humanitarian organizations that have had experience saving lives. Lifeline is in the Frontier Corps, and her job has been to provide support and care to those most affected by the war. Saras, which Gibraltar is a part of, is an organization specializing in finding missing and injured people that may have fallen victim to natural disasters or other accidents. They both have more experience outside of the games, but they don't really have any military training. They'd be a good support for a pilot in the war, but definitely not a formidable foe against a pilot, that's for sure. Next, let's talk about Bangalore and Fuse, both of which are a little more war experienced. Bangalore fought in the IMC war, and I think that so far she is the closest to being able to defeat a pilot. But let's not forget that she was a grunt. A skilled grunt for sure, but she still lacked the training and expertise of a pilot. She's crossed off the list. Fuse has grown up in a world where chaos is king. He's seen his fair share of combat, carnage, and probably death too. But at his heart, he is a bone cage fighter who is a little rough around the edges when it comes to tactical planning and combat experience. He worked as a mercenary and wanted to work his way up to become a powerful Salvonian warlord. I think with more experience in the field, Fuse could have been able to be powerful enough to take down a pilot. Salvo is a dog-eats-dog world, and for him to be alive after 54 years on that planet was pretty much delving into the carnage from such a young age is a feat in its own. So far, I think Fuse is the most likely to be able to take down a pilot. Let's pair Caustic and Horizon together. They're both scientists who could definitely use their kit to take down a pilot if the situations favour them well enough, but I think pilots are well trained enough to know not to take on these two without some careful consideration beforehand. We cannot just say that because Caustic and Horizon's abilities sound powerful in lore that that's enough to take down a pilot. We know these abilities can be overcome in game easily if you know how to counter them. If a pilot can find the weaknesses in these abilities, I think they could easily beat Horizon and Caustic. Both are just scientists who definitely have very little actual combat experience or military training. We know that Bloodhound has taken down a Goliath before, and they've grown up in an environment that requires them to think on their feet and be able to adapt to survive. I'm not sure how that could translate in a military setting though. Pilots have definitely been in training since a young age and will have decades more experience on how to engage into fights, how to use their equipment and weapons in combat, whilst Bloodhound really doesn't have much experience in that field, and their abilities are a little lackluster for a straight up one-on-one fight. Loba definitely has built up some hand-to-hand combat experience in her time, and she's obviously spent time training since a young age. Seeing her parents die in front of her is going to push her to train carefully for a long time. I would actually argue that she may be able to win a hand-to-hand fight against a pilot because she basically did it against Revenant, but she definitely doesn't have the same combat experience with weapons, and her abilities aren't going to give her an edge in fights like a grapple or jump kit would. So let's talk about Revenant. He's infamous as the killing machine. He's this big, scary simulacrum that could relentlessly hunt down pirates if he wanted to. If he died, he could just come back again and try again. But I think that's what makes Revenant hard to fight. He has basically an infinite amount of attempts to take down a target he's been tasked with killing. He's been doing that for 300 years already, so if Revenant was motivated to take down a pilot, I think he could do it, but it would take many lives to do so. If we're just having a one-off fight, then the pilot would win. Revenant hasn't had the chance to fight against that pilot many times to learn their weaknesses, and as we saw in his fight against Loba, he obviously isn't good enough to take her down after one attempt. But we could argue he never wanted to hurt Loba that bad, or maybe he's just not in his kill-hungry prime anymore. Wraith is an interesting story to tell. Unlike pilots, Wraith literally has superhuman powers. She has a connection to multiple dimensions that no other human has as far as we can tell. If Wraith wanted to, she could channel an infinite amount of herself from other dimensions to watch her 1 versus 1 fight against a pilot and have them tell her every possible outcome so she could confidently fight against one without making a single mistake. I think that Wraith would have to concentrate very hard to be able to listen to all of the voices telling her what to do, but honestly I think she has the best chance out of any legend to defeat a pilot because of this. Finally, we have Pathfinder. Spoiler warning for the lore book here, just end the video here if you don't want to be spoiled. Essentially, Pathfinder's creators filled his programming with all sorts of different things. It's kind of like Baymax. The creators could just write what they wanted Pathfinder to learn, and he would download that knowledge and it would become a part of his personality. So Pathfinder does have some very good training. It's hard to say whether he would defeat a pilot or not though. I actually think there's a good chance he could, it just depends how much military experience was given to him before booting up. And let's not forget he's not even human, so that has some benefits. He has strength higher than that of any human, and probably can withstand more damage than a human can. So there we have it, with pilots and legends actually being on the same level as each other in terms of their physical traits, for the most part at least, I'd argue that Wraith, Pathfinder and Revenant have the highest chance to beat Jack Cooper or a pilot, whilst Fuse and Loba could have it if things went their way, but that's the beauty of a fight, it really could go either way. I hope you enjoyed this video, I'll see you in the comments. Cheerio!